Hey everybody, welcome back to Engaging the Phenomenon. And this is going to be a double feature. This is going to also be on the podcast Exploring Higher Realities, because it is, as everybody's going to hear, very appropriate to do so. Today we are honored to have on Dalia Burgoin. And Dalia has uh, has come out more publicly recently. I think probably uh, most people will recognize her from the Contact in the Desert telepathy and psi demonstration, um, and also working with Rob Freeman in Mind Sight or Seeing Without Eyes or Vision Without Eyes. Really super incredible demonstration. I'm still baffled no matter how many times I watch the footage. And Dahlia has a background in chi or energy healing. Uh, of course, um, her daughter Lidu, sorry, has demonstrated some really just a off the wall, incredible in your face, what we would call telepathy, and she's going to be involved in a lot of upcoming projects. I'm pretty sure her emails are probably jammed up right now with people trying to contact her as she's come onto the scene. So, welcome.
Thank you. And yes, it's been very incredible after doing that demonstration. I've always been someone that was behind the scenes and just doing things for fun and passion and having things be word of mouth. And I never really wanted to be public, but when my daughter's telepathy started getting out there, I knew it was time. And these are all connected. All of these abilities are connected. So I felt very safe coming out because I was like, okay, like this is very much being led by what my daughter would call the team or the angels. And they're the ones telling us to go forward.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I'm just amazed. I've had experiences with uh, you know, uh, what people may call psi, or especially with the UFO phenomenon, but in many other um, capacities, I guess. And again, the aspect of like human to human psi is even more incredible to me. But just so people understand like the kind of veracity, you're also working with Dr. Diane Hennacy Powell.
I am, yes. So she and I are working together, doing experiments, and we're working in certain universities and getting some peer-reviewed science out there with my daughter, and she is demonstrating in a way that's very exciting. And so a lot of that's going to be coming out by the end of the year, and we're incredibly excited. She's already really blown them away. And
Yeah.
she's blowing me away every day, which what she can do and what she's been pushing herself to do more. So my daughter, she uses a letter board to communicate and also to show her telepathy. Initially, I had to hold the letter board and have her spell, and that's what I did at Contact. I held a letter board. I also wanted to show the audience that she didn't need a letter board. She grew out of it. And so, but because we were on stage, I didn't want her to just be put on the spot. So I gave her a piece of paper that had no letters on it. And it's kind of just replacing the letter board, but without having it to be a huge jump. This was a new skill for her. She was in front of an audience for the first time. But anyway, on the stage, you actually saw where I had no letter board in front of her. It was just a blank piece of paper. And she would just touch the paper and she would speak the telepathy. So she was speaking the letters. And so my whole point now, though, is she's even gone beyond that. And now I don't even have to hold anything in front of her. And she can either hold the letter board herself and point to the letters herself now, which is incredible. Like it's a very hard skill for these kids to telepathy kids to do that because of their motor control. So she can do that, and she can also do it by speaking the letters. So it's just a very exciting thing that we'll see coming out later on in the year.
Yeah, and I just want to preface with that so people understand this is not just like something where you're doing a demonstration, people are going to try to figure out some trick of how it's being done. Like this is being seriously investigated and evaluated, and the information is going to come out. So
Yes,
again, I
everything
don't
was
want.
done under rigorous laboratory conditions and in the universities with really big name scientists. So this is not something that's going to be just a demonstration. It is definitely, yeah, being studied in the way that the scientific community will accept, I think. I think the world, we just speak the language of science, and that's what the world believes truth is. And so that is the way we are going to bring the evidence is through science. And this is important to my daughter. To her, just saying a word that's coming from my head on a that's not to her, that's very simple telepathy. But in the scientific community, it's astounding. And so it's a simple thing that we need to do just to show telepathy is real. And that's going to open the doors to what Lidu really wants to have the world understand. And that is the messages from, we do have benevolent entities that are helping us. So there's messages from them, and then there's also messages from our teams, which she calls them the team, and that's more of a like angels and that kind of language. And she actually says that they're different. They're not the same beings, but they all communicate in a telepathic way because we are telepathic. In fact, she would say that all of us are telepathic. There's a very small percentage that isn't, but she would say all of us are telepathic. And the difference between her and the rest of us is she is in the group called an eavesdropper. And so those are the ones that know how to use their telepathy and they communicate with each other and others. And so she'll differentiate. She'll say that us eavesdroppers or the eavesdroppers. But yeah, to her though, we're all telepaths.
Yeah, and this idea of telepathy and interactions with non-human intelligence or beings or some other sentient entities is something I experienced myself and I think is important, you know, to this whole conversation, not just UFOs, but human potential, but also the greater nature of reality, because I mean, it says so much more about of who we are, right? And I think that, people are focused on this idea of disclosure and like these other entities, right? But I think one of the the deeper aspects and the profoundly impactful components of disclosure is who are we and what are we capable of, right? And how do we really relate to not just non-human intelligence or again what people may call angels. And I mean I had an experience face to face like with a light being, right? Yeah, you can certainly consider that an angel, and it felt divine, angelic, like all those qualities that you hear about. Um, and again, that's very real. And there's these other realms, right? Like I started my podcast exploring higher realities because it gets into this thing of higher realities, but it's all here right now, like ever present, right? It's like we don't have to go anywhere. You just have to shift your awareness, and there's trainings that you can do, and like even yourself working with subtle energy. And one of you know that demonstration, uh, which which to me is ultra fascinating, right? Like you have your wonderful daughter Lidu, and she has a very natural raw telepathy. Um, but just as interesting is I guess I can say like you're somebody who's normal, right? In the sense where like you're not like a full-blown psychic, right? You have a very I mean, again, there's no such thing as normal, and like my language here is sloppy, so I apologize. Like I would consider myself somebody like who's like a contemporary or who's like just like a regular person, like right? Like we work a regular job, we are parents and do that kind of thing. But you've been able to train yourself in the mind sight thing, right? Which is like it's something that's trainable rather than like just a raw innate potential thing, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And yeah, and so you were the demonstration, like what you were doing to me is like incredible, right? Because you're not a savant, right? as far as right, like in the same way that Lidu is, right?
Mm.
And this is sounding really bad because I'm not meaning to like undermine you by any means. I'm saying it's extraordinary that um there's the difference with the non-speakers who are just like raw potential full-blown telepathy versus people who have more of a consensus reality awareness like day to day and can still train in that capacity.
Yeah, even
So
before I got on the stage on Contact, nobody really understood what our demonstration would be. And so I told them about 5 minutes before, I said, I'm going to be demonstrating blindfold vision, mind sight, extraocular vision, whatever you call it. And they said, wait a minute, you? They're like, but it's going to be her, right? I said, no, 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 it's me. And they said, okay, but is she transmitting it to you? And I said, no, it's me. And so that was shocking. And then they said, well, did you learn it as a child? I said, I did not learn it as a child. And this is one of those, there's just so many misinterpretations that a person that can do these things is somehow special and they were born special. And what I always teach is like, nope, this is something we all can do. But what the funny thing is though, I still differentiate my daughter and me, and I see her as very special. And she tells me it's the same thing that we can do what she does. But in my head, because that part of our brain always has to have an excuse for everything,
yeah,
I still think, well, you have different neurological patterns than I do. Your brain is different than me. So I don't, and so I tell myself that's why you can do it and I can't. And I still kind of believe that. But according to her, we should be able to do the telepathy too, and that we are telepaths. And so as soon as I figure that out, I will share how I figured it out. But yes, I did figure out the mind sight. And when I did that, really shifted my world. And I realized there was so much I could do. I have been training, I'm a teacher at heart. And so I was able to figure out how to train this. And I was able to get just about anybody to be able to do it. So you don't have to be a child. That's another, the people who do believe in blindfold vision, they still just the majority of people still believe you have to be a child to learn it. Absolutely not. And some people will say, well, kids learn it easier because I said, no, not really. Like it's the same thing. Adults learn it just as fast. And so these are all limited ideas. And and yes, I've been able, some people might think, well, it's easier for a person that's seeing to do it and because they're using eyes or something like that. But I've also seen it very many times with blind people, like completely blind. And I've even worked with a woman with no eyes at all, who has never seen light in her life. And the week that I worked with her, she saw light for the first time and she got very good at it. She was able to track it. She's not just light, she's seeing everything. Like she's seeing colors. She's able to determine shapes and numbers. And I haven't gotten to the point, I'm still working with her. I haven't gotten to the point where we're reading yet because, and it's only because of a timing thing. If I was with her for another week, she'd definitely be reading. There's no doubt in my mind. She sees that much already. And so with the blind person, the only difference is they have to learn what they're seeing is. Um, for example, I worked with a blind man this or last week, and oh my goodness, it was amazing. He started reading on the second day. And when I say he started reading is because I showed him a bunch of letters. I kind of I brought up a letter on the screen. And I knew he could do it because he could describe shapes very well. And I said, can you describe what you're seeing? And he would describe the letters perfectly. And then I said, based on what you know about letters, can you tell me what letter that is? And it's a memorization thing at that point. So for a lot of the letters, he did know it, but some of them he just didn't know. And when he looked at it, he wasn't sure what it was, but he could definitely describe it perfectly. Like for example, with the letter U, he said, oh, I see a line on the left, I see a line on the right, there's nothing on the top, and then there's a curve on the bottom. And so that he would describe it like that. And I said, yes. And can you tell me what that is? He's like, I don't know. What is that, an A? And I said, no, 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 that was actually a U, but you described it perfectly. And so once he memorized it, then I said, all right, now we're going to put the letters together. Of course, he can already read Braille. He already knows, how to, what's, if I say the letters EAT, he knows how to read that. And so all he had to do is learn what they look like. And it was really quickly, it's really quick for him to learn to read. And so I was showing him certain letters on the screen of letters that he had already learned, and he was able to read them. The funny thing with him is I believe he thought that somehow with my energy background, I was somehow healing his eyes. He didn't tell me this, but this is what I was picking up, that he thought he was somehow using his eyes. And I told him, just for fun, let's put on the blindfold. Because this is mindset you're using. You're not using eyes, so there shouldn't be a difference. And he puts on the blindfold and he was reading even better. He was seeing even better with the blindfold. So it was just so fun and so incredible. And I can't wait till he comes out a little bit more about it because he's still processing all of this amazing experience that he had. And so he's still processing and he'll come out with it when he's ready.
I'm still processing. And I, I've seen different demonstrations, and I mean, you're talking about it so casually, and I understand why, because for me, the CE5 thing is the same way. Like it's just like it becomes a part of your life, right? And it becomes so matter of fact, and you've seen it over and over and over again. People listening to this are going to be like, wait, hold on, slow down. There's a person with no eyes who can see. There's blind people who can read. Um, I think that needs to sink in. And I think that's why it's so important what you are doing. And the people that you're working with and everybody that's involved in that, because again, just like the UFO subject, right? Like the idea that there's UFOs and non-human intelligence, like we've all heard about these things, right? But once somebody has an experience, it becomes very real, right? Or once at least somebody that has personally had an experience with a UFO or something, like all of a sudden it becomes real. Like people will have a knee-jerk reaction, like, oh my God, like they actually, rather than it being something in a movie or something out there, they have to actually contemplate the reality of it, right? And for me with like the CE5 thing, a reason I like that is because people could have their own experience with it, right? Rather than waiting for the government to release something and tell them what is real or not. And what's amazing is like you yourself, and again, I'm going to link the demonstration because I thought what you're doing, uh, reading words completely blindfolded, like double, triple layered blindfold, reading words that there's no way you can guess. Like I still have to watch it over and register, and I absolutely do believe it because I've seen way too many demonstrations from people I trust, and I mean, again, it's something that anybody can do, right? And then have that experience, and that experience will in turn alter their reality. So
Exactly.
how did you come across this?
Well, let me piggyback on what you just said about the whole reality thing. That's how I teach mindset because our logical brains, left brain, whatever you want to call it, it's going to make it hard to try to do it by yourself because in reality, a person that starts out doesn't believe they can do it. They don't believe it's possible to see without your eyes. And so what I do is I put on, well, there's many things I do, but what I do is I put on the blindfold on them and I basically trick them and into doing it. And so one way I do it is I help them to start being activated in front and they're seeing colors. And so the whole time they think, I don't know, maybe I'm just peeking or something. They're thinking that at first. And I'm putting the colors in the front. In reality, they think I'm putting it in front, but I'm really messing around and I'm learning. I'm just kind of I'm activating them in all these different ways that I know it works. And by the end, I could be 10 houses behind them with the colors and they're still getting it and they still the entire time think it's in the front. So I usually have another person helping me. So I need someone to go back there while my voice is still right next to them. So they think I'm putting it here. And then they see the video after and they'll say, wait a minute, the entire time I thought you were putting the color here. The whole time I thought it was like peeking right here or something, but you were all the way back there. And so that's how we get them to experience it and then it becomes reality. But if you can't just explain it to them, even if they see it with their eyes, it's not enough. They have to experience it themselves. And for a sighted person, that's how I get them to experience it. I go a different route with a blind person because there is no tricking them. It's just about getting them there gradually, which it doesn't take very long though. It can still take just a day or two with a blind person. But with them, it's more about once they open, having to teach them how to interpret the world around them. For example, the man I worked with this week, he's seeing, but he he didn't understand that even though we live in three-dimensional world, in this reality, it's three dimensions. He didn't understand that our eyes don't pick up three dimensions. It only picks up two. And there's these subtle ways that we can tell when something's far or close. And so I was, I had to teach him that. I said, hey, look what happens. These two things are the same size, but when I go like this one gets smaller. That's how you know when something's far away. So that's just an example. Other things that he noticed that was really cool. Like one day, he would get up, and at first he noticed, for the first time, he's like, whoa, I see the TV. Like he saw the rectangular TV and he pointed it out. I thought it was super cool. And then he got up to walk with me, and he noticed the TV looked like it was moving. You know how when we walk, it looks like the things beside us are moving? Or if you're in a car and and another car moves, it feels like you're moving. Or
Yeah.
so he didn't know that happened, and he was just like, "Whoa! It looked like that thing just moved." I said, "Yep, that's what happens when you move. It looks like the other objects are moving." And there's just so many little things like that that we take for granted that I was getting to teach him and explain to him. Another really funny thing that made me laugh is every time he saw his shadow, he would be like, Dalia, what is that? Like, what is that black thing that keeps following me? And I'm like, that is your shadow. And I've had to say it so many times to him. That's your shadow that you're seeing that you keep pointing at. So it was just so funny. And it was so heartwarming to see all of these little things that he got so excited about. It's like, so anyway, going back to your question, how did I get started in this? So I've actually been, my whole life, I was very much into meditation. Since a little kid, was very much into meditation and being in prayer and being close to the other side, and nowhere near like my daughter. I did have telepathy when I was a kid that I do remember. And I remember thinking it was weird that nobody else seemed to be able to do it. But that went away, like, or at least I don't have any recollection after maybe I was in first grade, went away. And a couple of other things. I used to hear beings too. Again, all of that kind of went away when I was in my first grade. And so, but I do remember knowing I was going to do energy work, although I didn't know what that was called back then. I just knew I had to work with energy. I didn't even know what it was. I didn't even know the word energy was what it was, but I always imagined, or it wasn't even imagining, I would get these visions of me healing people by laying my hands on them, but I was always wearing Asian clothes and I didn't understand what this meant. I just knew I was looking for it. And then I finally ran into it in my 20s, the system that I work with. So it's a more of a yin style energy cultivation system. So every day I'm cultivating more energy. So every day it's a daily practice I do. A lot of meditation, lots of chi building, and it's always gradually progressing. And I learned from there about psi abilities, and I got really good at being blindfolded and being able to tell everything apart. But I never really understood how to see with colors and everything. I got to the point where I was really good at seeing outlines. And so everything was dark, but I could still get around. I could see the outlines of the doors and the tables. I could walk around in a new place, but it was totally dark. I didn't understand how people could see colors and read. I just didn't get that at all. But doing this kind of a practice for a long time, you get other abilities that kind of spontaneously happen. There's so many abilities that we don't even have names for. But I would always have this one experience, and this sounds weird, but I'm sure some people, there's just so much weird stuff out there. But I used to have this one experience where I would sit up and I would be in the future. It was like I would be in the future and I'd be experiencing the future, but I would know it doesn't make, like, where I am doesn't make sense. And it's usually a few hours in the future, or it might be a week in the future, but I would be sitting there and I would be experiencing it as if I was there. And so there was this one time I sat up because I had meditated with my blindfold on, and I sat up and I saw the entire room. And I remember looking around, I saw my daughter on the bed, and I remember thinking, this is how I knew it was the future. My daughter wasn't on the bed with me when I lay down, so I knew I was in the future. And I remember thinking, wow, I'm supposed to start seeing through this blindfold now. And so that is how I started researching, where can I kind of pick this up? And that's when I ran into Rob and Wendy's seminar. Well, they didn't actually have a seminar yet. They were just free online at that time. And so I remember having one session with Rob Freeman, if anyone
Mhm.
doesn't know who that is. So I had one session with him on a video call, and it went really well. That was my first time seeing with my mind's eye. And I thought, wow, this was really good. And even he thought, like, wow, she's going to be really good. And so I went to their seminar, and on the second day, I was able to see. And they thought that was amazing. They're like, wow, this is incredible. Like, she opened so fast. And so after that, Rob called me back to help with future seminars. But when I started to see, that's when I thought I figured this out. I figured out the glitch in the matrix. I know how to do a lot of stuff now because I just figured this out. Because I realized I was only able to do what my logical brain believed or believed enough. And so I somehow tricked myself to be able to see. And then once I did, I knew exactly what to say to people to get them to see. And so I've been able to train it very well and with Rob gave me a lot of opportunities to train a lot of people in a short amount of time. And so I got very confident in what mindsight was. And that's how I knew with John, sorry, with this one person, that's how I knew that with blind people, that they could be blindfolded and they could still see. It didn't matter. They were using mindsight. Eyes mean nothing. Like we're not using eyes at all. I don't know what we're using. I've actually been reached out to by IONS, and they're wanting to work with me and just to kind of discover what's happening. And what I love about today versus decades ago is scientists now are not out there to debunk. They're trying to figure out what's going on. And so I feel totally excited about it because I'm like, I want to figure out what's going on too. Why are we able to do this? And what senses are we using? And so that is another, not just ions. I'm also working with Alex Gomez. And so we're just kind of trying to figure this out, like what is going on. But in the meantime, I'm having a lot of fun helping blind people to experience the world in vision for the first time and realize like, wow, like there's so much more that we can do. And it's interesting because you can use the same concepts and help people with their psi abilities. And so the blind man that I worked with, not only did we help with his being able to see, but his psychic abilities were through the roof. What he was able to do was mind blowing. He was able to if I were to hold colors and things out of his, away from him, I wasn't even in his line of vision and I'm very, very far away. He was able to still tell them apart by other senses that we kind of worked on. And so this can be done with anyone, all of these senses can be enhanced. And so yeah, I'm very excited about this year. And my daughter says that all of this is very connected. It's all a part of telepathy in a way. So I'm still learning with everyone else, but it's very fun for me. And like you said, I did start out as a normal person, and I still am a normal person because I see these abilities as normal. I see them as just our senses. In fact, when I'm working with people, I start on the senses that their brain can accept. So the first thing I do is help them to differentiate colors by feeling it, because everyone can think, oh, I could tell things apart by feeling. Even though these will be two things that are completely identical in every way except for color. They'll get to the point where they can easily identify it by feel. And then once we work with that, we'll go on to more things that their brain probably wouldn't have accepted beforehand. So it's a lot of fun. It's so fun seeing how far we can take this.
Yeah, and again, I think people really need to see this and experience this firsthand. I mean, some people, the demonstrations are enough to open their mind to the possibility. There's going to be people skeptical, and I understand the skepticism just because if I had not experienced the just say like the non-human intelligence UFO UAP experiences that I had myself, it would be hard for me to take it at face value, right? But the experience itself is a game changer. And but I mean, even just facilitating demonstrations and doing what you're doing, right? If people are tuned into the idea of morphogenic field and the morphogenetic field effect, like the work of Dr. Rupert Sheldrake and 100th Monkey Effect, where the more people that are turning these potentials online, the easier it becomes for other people um, to unlock themselves, right? That kind of field of resonance. But
Yeah, there's a couple of kind of skeptics. To me, there's a healthy skepticism, which everyone should have, where if you see something remarkable and they say, hey, science is going to come out to show you this, them being willing to look at the science and actually make a decision. But then there are some who will say, I'm not even going to look at evidence because it's too ridiculous.
Right,
It's,
right. And you
it's
get that with UFOs too, right? Like you can
Mhm.
drop like decades of research and information and data that is like anybody with common sense has to say I don't know what's going on, but there's something is obviously here, or there's something obviously like real about this, even if you can't say what it is particularly. There's just people that have that reaction, and we have to we have to help open them up a little, right? They need a few nudges, but I mean, again, the work you're doing is absolutely incredible. And in regards to say your background, right? And again, I don't want to say, oh, you're normal, I'm normal, but for people watching and listening, like we're normal in the sense, but right, even you had, I would say, probably when you were younger, you were sensitive to subtle realities, as I was as well, right? Um, but when I started practicing again, I had experiences when I was younger, and then you get older, some of that you get conditioned out of it a little bit, right? Even though I would still have spontaneous activations in different regards. Um, when I started practicing Qigong and Merkaba, I had a whole like reality kind of reopened for me, right? And in some case burst open. And just a kind of nod or support to some of what you're saying about blind people being able to see, which is absolutely incredible, right? It's still like even like the stuff amazes me. There was I guess you can say a controversial uh New Age book by this individual, Drunvalo Melchizedek, super controversial, and I guess you can say the New Age subject, but and again, he had a documentary called Through the Eyes of a Child, and in that at the very end of it, there was a demonstration of kind of mind sight where this young girl was blindfolded and she was performing like psychic feats. But in his book, um, the first volume of this book called the Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, he talked about NASA studying an individual. And if some researchers can follow up on this and find out information, it's hard to dig up. There was this woman named Mary Ann Shinfield. That's Schinfield. I'm gonna put it in the description as well. Where there's a blind woman, but she was able to just walk around, right? And she could like as if she could see, but she was legally blind, and NASA had her like remote viewing satellites reading off the satellite what it said, and nobody else could guess or tell you that, and she was able to just read it as if, and she always described it as that there was a screen that came on in her mind, and she would have these different screens with different information, and she can kind of cater what she wanted to see and like the main screen, or if she wanted to see something else, like she would see, oh, if there was entities around, she would see them in this screen up here, and it's really fascinating. But um again, we're as for normal people, like people can do this, and that's one of the takeaways I want people to have from this conversation, but also with like engaging the phenomenon in general, right? Like you could practice um the mind sight. You can practice CE5 and have a firsthand experience if you're willing to and if you feel comfortable with it. But um, I wanted to shift a little bit and talk about your daughter, just in the sense of like what I mean, this is something I wonder, like what was that like, right? To discover um that she was able to do some of the stuff that she's able to do.
Was incredible. But it's like every day I still keep discovering more. And so I'm discovering it in a pace that I can handle. At first, it was very overwhelming. It was right after, well, it wasn't after. I discovered it maybe a few months or, yeah, a few months before my mind sight opened. And I just remember being mind blown. And then my mind sight opened. And then she continued to mind blow me some more. And But yeah, the first thing my daughter told me when she was able to communicate with me, well, let me back up a little bit. So my daughter is a non-speaker, but we progressed her so much that if someone saw her now, they would be like, how is she a non-speaker? But it's one of those things when a blind person gets mind sight, they're still a blind person, but they can see. So
Yeah,
my
yeah,
daughter, though, we got her into a spelling to communicate system, and within 6 months, she was able to communicate with the provider. And so I would always drive to the provider with my daughter to have conversations with her. But I practiced with her every day until finally I was able to communicate with her, and it took 2 years. And that's when she told me finally, I asked her one day, I said, Lidu, you're such an amazing artist. She was a savant artist her whole life. So I knew she was a savant in some way. I said, you are amazing at a lot of things. You can also write backwards. She can do art backwards. If you give her your name, she can write it really quickly backwards and put it in the mirror and it's perfect. Or you ask her to draw a picture, same thing. Music, she can make a song backwards. It's just, she has these amazing savant abilities. So I said, do you have any others that I don't know about? And that's when she said, I can discern spirits. And that's how it all started. That's when she started telling me everything. And I'm sitting here trying not to go like, what? I'm trying to maintain my composure because I didn't want her to not communicate with me because I was afraid if I overstimulated her, she would stop communicating and regress. And so she would tell me something, and then after about 15 minutes, I would stop talking about it. But I'd be like, oh my goodness, she just opened up a rabbit hole for me. She just opened up another one. And every day she would open up more. But one of the first things she told me is she could discern different kinds of spirits. And there's all these different ones out there, and that her whole life she's had mentors um, teaching her about everything. And that she's always had friends that she's been able to communicate with. And it just kept going on and on from there. And then I learned that she actually could read my mind. Before that, I had started to wonder. I said, how do you know this? Like, I was just thinking this. Why did you say that? There were times where I would try to get her a gift and she would be outside and she would just come in as soon as I would order it and run upstairs. She's like, Mommy, and then, like really happy. What did you just do? What did you just buy? And then she will like try to look at my phone because I would still have it on there. And I'd be like, go away. You're always eavesdropping, just
yeah,
teasing her. And so I always had this idea, but once she said it straight out, then that's when I would write stuff down and have her spell it for me, and she'd be able to spell everything. And I was like, oh my goodness. And then once she got really fluent with communicating with me, that's when I noticed it was way beyond reading my mind. It was as if she and I have the same memories almost. It's even more beyond that. Like there will be times where I would on a trip somewhere on a seminar and I would come back and she would tell me about stuff that happened during a seminar, conversations that I had. She would add to the conversations and I wouldn't even be thinking about it at the moment. She will just bring it up on her own because she wants me to tell someone something from the trip. She would mention their name and everything, and I would not even be thinking about them. But even on top of that, she was able to access stuff about the trip that I wasn't even there for. And I could validate with the people who were there. And so I asked her, how are you doing this? And she says, well, I just teleport myself. And so every time I go on these trips, she would always tell me, Mommy, I was there. She would tell me she was there, and it's incredible. But this is my reality now. And so even this call right now we're doing, even this podcast, afterwards, I can go over there and ask her, what did you think about it? And she'll be able to just tell me the key points, even things I'm not even thinking about. She'll be able to just tell me what she thought about what you said or what I said. And it's as if she's here with us right now. And this is the funny thing. Sometimes when people say, hey, did you tell your daughter about me? Saying, did you tell her my name or should I introduce myself? I'm like, you don't need to introduce yourself. She knows who you are. Because I know who you are. And so that there is
yeah.
no need to introduce, hey, Lidu, she knows already. And so sometimes I do it just for social reasons, but she knows already. And so I never have to introduce or tell her anybody's background. I don't even have to tell her anybody's questions. I say, Lidu, he has a question. Can you answer it? That's all I have to do. Because she doesn't just read my mind, she can read others. But she is kind of how do I say it? She is very respectful with other people's minds. She knows she's allowed to access me at all times. but she's very respectful with others, and she won't just tap into your mind if you don't want her to. So, and she can tell when people don't want it.
And what are some of the things she said about entities and what the entities are and what they've communicated or taught or think and that kind of thing?
So I haven't asked her too much about entities, but others have. Whenever we would do interviews, or not interviews, but whenever we would talk to a scientist or somebody, or even Dr. Diane, they would ask her, what does she have to say about that? And she would say that there's definitely entities out there that are communicating with us telepathically. She says that they communicate in sound frequencies and only certain people could hear them, but they are benevolent, the ones that she's communicating with at least. And they can help us. All you have to do is ask them telepathically to interfere, and they will. And I said, Lidu, when you say this stuff, it really sounds like you're talking about angels. Like, because it sounds very similar. Are they the same? And she says, no, they're not. But they're helping us in a similar way. And we can communicate with them telepathically. And that's all I really got, because when I talk to her, she's just so much going on, and she only has a certain window before she gets overstimulated and gets tired. Because for her to communicate with me in this reality, that is, how with mind sight we're putting ourselves in this ultra state and doing all this stuff so we can do it. It's the same with her. I'm pulling her
Yeah.
from the right brain and I'm bringing
Yeah.
her to the left brain so that she can talk to us. And I'm constantly, if you notice on stage, she'll say, Mommy, can you tickle me? She'll say stuff like that. And I said, I
Yeah.
can't because this is a
Oh, so
demonstration.
cute. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that is actually, this is how she comes here into the left brain, is by remembering her body senses and focusing on them. Whereas for us, if we want to go out of body and have those kind of experiences, we have to forget our body senses and we have to kind of let them go. And so it's the opposite. And so anyway, I forgot where I was going with that, but yeah, with her, I'm constantly bringing her, doing a lot of stuff to bring her into the left brain so she can communicate. But the majority of the time, she is out of her body. She says it's about 80% of her is out of her body every day, and there's only a small percent that's in the body or that's controlling it. And it's very hard for her to control it, but that's what we work on every day. And so the same way I help blind people to go beyond what they believe is possible, or beyond what humans think is possible, I do the same with her and what people think is possible for level 3 autism. And so people would never believe that she started out as a non-speaker who had little control of her body. You saw on the stage in Contact that even when that alarm went off, she was in control and she was very calm. She didn't scream. She didn't need anything covering her ears. That was all stuff we worked on every day and we continue to work on every day to build her skills beyond what they think is possible. And this is why Leelu can now do it independently. That is just remarkable. Like, that's very hard to find a kid that's telepathic that can do it independently, holding their own board. Um, and so it's just a matter of my I always have this saying I tell everyone I'm training. I say it's not about impressing, it's about progressing. So everything's about progression. Every single time we work together, progression. That's what we want. If you're already seeing very well with the blindfold, or if you're blind and you're already seeing, what can we get you to do next? It's always about how much can we progress, and it's infinite. So with my daughter, we're just constantly progressing her and her abilities, and so she is going to be very soon, I believe, able to just speak the telepathy instead of having to spell it letter by letter. She's just going to be able, and we've actually recorded her doing it a couple times where she just said the word. If I had the word written down, she would say the word. Um, but we're not at that stage where she's doing it consistently yet. It's just a harder skill, but we'll get her there.
Yeah, and that's incredible. And I really like how you guys are bridging the gap, right? Where you explain how it's like almost like opposite sides of the spectrum where for her to tap into the consensus physical motor skill left brain reality and maintain herself in it is an effort just as it is for us to do the opposite and tap into her perspective and her world with the telepathy and the subtle energy and the entities and the hill, right? uh
Exactly. One of the things that people tend to not understand is they see the wonderful things that Leelu can do and they think, wow, you're so lucky. And I'm like, it took a lot of work. And it's a consistent work. There's a lot of hard parts about having a child that has this ability. But one of the things that's interesting is people say, she's so magnificent, she's so superhuman, she's so this and this and that. But she thinks the same about us. She thinks the ability that we have to, like, for example, to tell time and have a concept of time, she thinks that's incredible. And she knows that's something she lacks. And so she relies on me to be able to keep time for her. For example, if something's for 5 minutes later, that's impossible for her. Like to her, you might as well, it's just, there is no such thing as time. But she understands it as a logical thing, but she just can't connect with time right now. And so she relies on me to help her with that. And there's a lot of things that she thinks it's incredible that we can do. Like we can tell where our body parts are without looking at them and without feeling them. We just know where they are. And so we have these senses that are very heightened that she doesn't have. And on the other side of the scale, she has these senses that we think are actually remarkable. So we're both, it's like you said, we're both very incredible in different ways. And we can build upon what we have and make them even stronger.
Yeah, and I mean, I think people have to appreciate the kind of the blessing to just be able to again like to just live, right? I mean, the miracle of reality and existence and to be sentient. It's a blessing to be here, right? And we're experiencing this reality together. But the thing about time, right, is very interesting also because I think in the same way that Lidu talks about us, like it's amazing we're able to, you know, just automatically know where our body is and understand time in a linear way. I think it's been described in a few places that some of these entities or non-human intelligence are fascinated with us for the same reason, because of our perspective of reality. You know, we think, oh wow, there's these advanced beings and they can do all these things, but at the same time, they're just as fascinated with us and what we're able to perceive and do in the way that we do it. And I think in like CE5 and contact and the interactivity that, we're learning from each other, just like, you and Lidu learn from each other, right? And that is also going on with different non-human intelligences, I believe. And, we kind of meet in the middle and it's a mutual learning and progression, right? As you said. And, you know, getting to the idea of maybe what some of her reality looks like. There was this great quote by Dr. Robert Gilbert, who passed away this past year. But yeah, the quote's been said by other people in different forms. But this idea that human beings are like fish in water, and the water around us is consciousness and energy, and that there's beings around us at all times in different, like, people would say, oh, maybe like a different dimension, right? And we're constantly interacting with them on different levels, even if it's subtle and even if we're not aware of it, right? And somebody might receive some kind of like guidance, right? But they don't see it as that. They feel it as an impression or an impulse. But
Mhm.
it's actually what maybe somebody would consider a guardian angel or something, like trying to nudge them in a certain direction, right? And I that might open up a can of worms, and I don't want to get people paranoid that there's like entities all around them at all times, like driving their impulses. I don't like we are very much conscious and aware and have free will and that extent, I guess. But there's this other like reality going on at the same time, and we're just not completely aware of it, like in the way that Lido is.
Yeah,
So
and to go on what you just said, well, number one, if we're just going by what our eyes can see, our eyes can only pick up about 5% of the visual spectrum, of color, and we only can see about 5% what's in front of us. And so that means that's a huge amount of stuff that we're limited and we're not able to see. And the whole thing about the entities and all that stuff, Lily does explain that a lot. Um, so she'll say, at least let's talk about the angels a little bit, what
yeah,
she calls angels. She says every background will call them something different. Most of the kids call them those, most of the telepathy kids call them an angel, but she says it doesn't matter. They're the same beings in all different backgrounds. We just all have different names. But there's these benevolent beings that are a part of us. They're not the ETs, they're different.
Right,
But
right.
they're these beings that are assigned to us. And this is how she will say it. Um, so when I always understood angels to be something like in another dimension. And if you wanted their assistance, you would pray or something, and then they would maybe come out and help you. And and they would come from somewhere far away, maybe in the sky or something. And Lidu says, absolutely not. Lidu says these are telepathic beings. A prayer is just telepathy. It's another word for it. But she says that these are telepathic beings that are around us our entire life. They're our team, and we all have a different number, but let's just say we have a bunch of them around us at all times, never alone. And they are listening to our thoughts all the time, but they will never interfere unless you actually say, hey, I need you guys to interfere. And the way she describes it, she makes it almost sound, this is my words, not hers, but this is how I understand it. She makes it sound like we're in a virtual reality game and we're the player this time. And those team members are our friends that they're going to get a turn next, and they're our friends. So we're on the same level as they are, and they're helping us because we're their friend. And they love, it's not because they're helping us because it's their job. It's more like they see us as one of them. And this is almost like an avatar or a virtual reality suit, whatever you want to call it. And so anyway, and so they hear all our thoughts, and as soon as we say, hey, friends, help me out here, they will. So that's kind of how I understood the way she described it. And I've always kind of talked to the angels before, and I always noticed things happening for me all the time. But once Leelu put it like that, it started to become much more real for me. And now whenever she wants me to help her in any way, she'll say, Mom, can you tell your team this? Basically,
Yeah.
can you get your team to do this? But yeah, Leelu, she really is excited for me to pick up the telepathy as good as her. And she's constantly urging me, Mom, can you get on this? Put more effort onto the telepathy because right now it's almost like a one way where if I need to tell her something, I could just say it in my mind. I don't even have to say the question out loud, nothing. I could just talk to Leelu with my mind. But in order to get the answer, I always have to give her the letter board. So she's like, it'll be so much easier, Mom. It'll be so much easier if we don't need the letter board, you know. And so I will get there. But I've just been so focused on so many things with the Mind Sight and the upcoming events. We have the side games coming up. Both Lilu and I will be there, and Lilu will be demonstrating telepathy, and I'll be doing Mind Sight on one of the teams. So yeah, it'll be kind of fun. But these are the kind of things that are on my mind right now, and why I haven't been focusing so much on my telepathy. I'm also focusing a lot on getting her to be ready for the experiments we're going to be doing. So I need her to be really, really good to the point where she can't mess it up, where she is, doing it independently without me being near her. That's another thing about these experiments is I'm going to be across the room when she's doing the telepathy, and she can already do it. It's just about getting her used to controlling her body to that degree more for a longer period of time than just a few minutes.
Yeah, and I love what you had to say about the entities and that kind of aspect of reality and how she described it with the teams and how they are like I'm trying to find the right word because in some of my interactions, right, I had the clear communication that they're related to us, right? And you mentioned ETs, and I want to say that a lot of what is going on with interactions, right? Even UFOs, it's getting jumbled up in this one thing, and we're putting it in the categories, and I do think there are categories and discernments, right? But let's say I think there are things where or experiences and incidents where people are encountering some of these entities, and it gets thrown into the UFO thing because we don't know what to call it, right? Right? It was a ball of light was interacting with me or a light being, and the modern lens or framework is UFOs, aliens, right? And I think some of that even during CE5, right, where you're intending to have an encounter with an intelligence. I think some of those um encounters that are happening are not always with advanced extraterrestrial biological entities. I think that does occur, but I think once you're kind of opening up your awareness to the subtle realities and perception, a lot of this stuff is coming with it, right? And just because you're out in the field and you see something in the sky doesn't mean it's an extraterrestrial. It could be also these entities, or we're, again, it depends what tradition you're working with. Maybe someone will say you're opening the yin field and allowing these entities to manifest in a physical reality within that energetic bubble, right? Especially if you create a very large one with a group. Um, so I I think we're very early in the learning process of all this, and because of that, we're trying to like understand it and categorize it, which is totally normal, right? But I think that again, when people go out and do CE5, you're not just encountering extraterrestrials and whatnot. I think that there are a great variety of other intelligence and entities that are interacting with us, right? Including,
Yeah, I agree. My daughter, a couple of people would ask her, "Hey, what is this item?" Thinking, and then my daughter will say, "This happened recently," where someone asked her what a certain item was, and she says, "Well, this person thinks it's from an ET, but it's actually from an angel, and angels would me back." And so she actually will say that, we'll think it's one thing, but it's really another.
and it's fine because we're learning. And I could just absolutely talk to you forever. I love your energy and your composure and everything you're doing and you're sharing. So I mean, I would love to have you on another time when you're not in the midst of like changing the world and everything, and teaching and all that. But I do want to ask one more question, and that is, what do you think Lidu would want to communicate to everybody, and what are some of your thoughts of like a takeaway message of all this? Because it's very easy for us to like look and at like the telepathy and the mindset and be fascinated, right? And but what from somebody that's been in this, right, has been experiencing it day to day, what are some things that you would want people to take away from all of this?
Well, Lidu is here, and many of the telepathy kids are being born now. At least this is how she describes it, to help humanity evolve. And we're at the time where we are going to evolve. And telepathy is not going to be this incredible concept anymore. It's just going to be reality. It's going to be something that we're going to look back on and say, I can't believe people didn't think telepathy was real. This is so funny. How primitive did we think before? Kind of like with the microorganisms, when people didn't believe there were microorganisms because they
Yeah.
couldn't see them. And so that's what we would say. We're here to evolve humanity. She talked about the telepathy kids um, and and that there's a lot of teachings out there. She even, sorry, this is a little off topic, but yeah, she even works with people who have never been born yet, or people that have passed on, and they, she works with them part-time. It's like she's working with them as she's being a little girl. And she'll tell me these stories, and I'm like, this is incredible. But like right now, it's mostly just incredible, but eventually it will just become reality. And so the world is going into a change right now, and we're all a part of that change and experiencing it. And it's fine if you need science to prove it. And again, to her, just showing telepathy is how the world is going to accept it. Just showing easy telepathy, just me putting a phrase or a word down in a random word generator and her getting it from across the room. If that's what it takes, well, it's not even if that's what it takes. She knows that's what it takes, and she's willing to do whatever because this is her life's purpose and this is her mission. And so anyway, again, we're all telepathic, and it's not just special beings. We're all able to do it. We're all able to do mind sight, even though we're normal.
Yeah.
And and it'll become, if you need science to tell you, it's totally fine. But it is going to happen.
Yeah, and again, I appreciate you and coming on to here to share with all of us, and for all the work that you're doing. I mean, you know, um, Lidu and yourself, or you're really putting yourself out there. It takes a lot of bravery, courage, determination. So, thank you guys so much because we need it.
Thank you. Thank you for providing the platform for Lelu's teachings to get out there. They'll come out soon enough, as soon as everyone accepts the telepathy.
Yeah. So again, I hope to have you on again sometime because I feel like we didn't have nearly enough time to talk and, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.